I've missed hanging out with you, especially teaching over the last few weeks, but I was really grateful to have the author of this book, Creatures of Habit, that's inspired this series with us last week. It was cool to see all of you interacting with him, and I hope you've had a chance to get the book or jump into one of these discussion groups, or maybe your group at Suncrest is doing what my men's group is doing and talking through these issues over the next 5 weeks. It's really, really an exciting experience to have together. One of my favorite quotes is from F.M. Alexander. He said this. He said, "People don't decide their futures. People decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures." And surely you've experienced that in all the same ways I have to know that that's entirely true. Our oldest son just finished up his 4 years in the Marines, so he's back home with us now. And at the turn of the year, we kind of decided together we wanted 2023 to be a year of health and strength. He likes going to the gym. I have good ideas about going to the gym. So we said we're going to go to the gym. We're going to be healthy and strong. That's what I decided. We're going to be healthy and strong. And so far in 2023, he decided to go to the gym just about every day. And last night, I decided to go to the gym for the first time in 2023. Yeah, there would be things you should clap for. That is not one of them. Because actually, I was so hungry after I was at the gym last night that I decided to eat half a can of Pringles at home last night, which isn't really aiming toward healthy and strong this year. But this is what we know, right? We might have dreams. We might say we want a certain future, but we decide our habits. And it's whatever we do day in and day out, week in and week out, the things that we prioritize and the things we don't prioritize that actually will take us where we're going to go in life. Whenever I meet with someone pastorally and they're going through something difficult, people, of course, would love to have, I don't think they'd usually expect it, but they'd love to have some golden answer that I could give them that will set them on the course they need. But most of the time, my advice is, so you're going to need to do this, and it's going to be hard, and it's going to have to be every day for a long time, and then things can change. But that's just the real life nature of life. So over these 5 weeks, we're looking at some of the habits in our lives. They're actually negative habits in our lives that infect us in some ways that aren't healthy at all, and asking ourselves, could we transform that into something that's actually healthy? And Steve kicked off the series last week, and he used this passage. I think it's the perfect passage for this whole series. It says, "Do not conform to the pattern, the habits of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And I just want you to see this, like for yourself in real life, how this works. All of us are tempted to conform. When we conform to a certain pattern, if it's something healthy, then we've shaped ourselves in a healthy way. But the pattern of this world, the habits of this world, is a broken world. It's a messed up world. It's an infected world. And so when we just take what all this world draws us to do and say, well, I'll just kind of fall into that cycle, get this, we're actually conforming to something that's deformed. And all of these habits that we're talking about are actually part of the deformed nature of this world. But this scripture says, and this is very important for tonight, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So this weekend we're talking about the nature of cynicism. And I was just thinking about this in my own life, and I've had a lot of experiences where I've been both on the giving end and the receiving end of cynicism, but I had one kind of unifying experience where it was all there together. So a lot of you know that about 6 years ago, my wife and I decided to be foster parents, and when we got into the system, and trying to figure it out, we had good motives at the start. We still have good motives. We just wanted to help. But once we got into the system, there were a lot of discouraging things that we came across. And kind of early on in our experience, we would come across someone who was, one of the workers in the system, and they just weren't doing a very good job, and they weren't following through on what they said they would do for us, and we felt like maybe even at times they weren't being honest with us or giving us a fair shot. And I noticed over time that what that one worker did to me that I was so frustrating and disappointing to me, I started to lay on to the next worker. I started to become cynical about everybody involved in the system. And you know what would happen if someone walks in and the next worker, maybe has all the same challenges? That just reinforced for me that that's the way everybody is. But eventually, I start to actually anticipate that whatever worker is going to come into our home really is useless. And if I anticipate them as useless and I treat them like I think they're going to be useless, it actually increases the chance that they're going to be useless, and they're starting at a deficit because I've become cynical about this situation. Now, on the flip side of that, we've had different kids come through our home over the 6 years, and more than once, there have been kids who have come into our home, and you can imagine our posture. We have a lot of grace for these kids. They come out of difficult situations, but there's also, I'll just be honest about it, there's a little bit of me that's like, hey, but I'm doing this for you, right? And sometimes children would come into our home, and I would feel like they weren't giving me a fair shot. And I started thinking, what? Why aren't they giving me a fair shot? I'm here trying to help them. But sometimes the reason they weren't giving me a fair shot is because they had, on the opposite end of the system, had the same exact experience that I had had. A tough one, been moved around, bounced around, not cared for, and now they're in my house. What are they supposed to expect? And this is the way that cynicism takes root inside of us. We actually have one or two or a small number of negative experiences that are real. But then we stop and we start to apply that to all these areas of life, all these situations, all these groups of people in a way that is unfair to them. And for more than one of us, it's become a habit. It's become a pattern. And it's not good for you. It's not good for anyone around you. And maybe if we could transform this, something could really change. Here's a definition of cynicism. This is actually in Steve Poe's book, Creatures of Habit. So cynicism is an attitude of scornful or jaded negativity, especially a general distrust of the integrity or professed motives of others. Now, there's a lot to that, but I want you to see the big idea here, because I think sometimes when people think, are you cynical, they confuse it with the idea of being critical. Now, cynical and critical are first cousins. They absolutely are related to one another. But cynicism is something that's a little bit different than criticism. Someone who's a critic usually has a negative dominance in the words that they say. A number of years ago, because this is a spiritual issue too, I was talking about kind of the posture of our words and whether we're positive or negative. And this is one of those sermons that people repeat back to me almost more than any other, because I basically laid it out like this. This is not complicated for the critic. I said, hey, whenever you notice something good, you should say something, right? You like somebody's sweater? Tell them you like their sweater. You think someone's a good mom or dad? Tell them they're a good mom or dad. Someone's been a helpful friend to you? Make sure you tell them they're a helpful friend. So anything that's good, say it. And then I always tell people, like you should say it as often as you can. You should say it if it's your boss. You should say it if it's your mom. You should say it if it's your kid. You should say it if it's a coworker. You should just say it. You should say it by email, or you should say it by text, or you should say it by phone call, or maybe write them a note. Just say it. Like, be positive, right? And here's the flip side. Whenever you notice something negative, don't say it. It's almost that simple, right? Like, if you don't like someone's sweater, just don't say anything. If you don't think someone's a good parent, you don't have to announce that to them. If you don't think someone's a good friend, give them a little grace in the midst of that. And say it don't say it, don't say it by text, don't say it by call, don't say it by anything. That's the nature of being a critic. It dominates what comes out of our mouth, and that's important. But cynicism is actually one step back from that, in that it dominates our minds. In fact, for some people, being a critic and being a cynic goes together. You have this negativity in your mind, and it comes out of your mouth. But some people are disciplined cynics, so that it doesn't always come out of our mouth, but it still dominates the way that we think. You see, in this definition, cynicism is an attitude. It's something that's going on in our mind. It's a way that we see the world. It's not just what comes out of our mouth. And, this is important, it's a general distrust. Something specific may have happened to you once, But you took that specific thing and you blew it up to something general, and now you've kind of decided the whole world is this way. And I think it's a really important element for us to think about in our cynical mind, because what happens? Well, we start to anticipate or expect the worst of others. And when you anticipate or expect the worst, first of all, you're judging someone in a way that Jesus would teach us not to. And second of all, you're actually laying the groundwork for it to be harder than it needs to be, and you will often get what you expect because you anticipated the worst. Sometimes in cynicism, you fit the profile of essentially a doomsday prepper, right? You look at the world and you do all your preparation for all the negative scenarios that could come about. But when that dominates our mind and our thinking and our attitude, it leaves us in a place where we're not hopeful or dreaming or anything like that. And for some of us, and maybe this is the biggest piece for some of us, being a cynic causes us to question people's motives. So that even when someone is doing a good thing, we step back and say, yeah, but there's probably something in it for them. They're probably doing it because of this or that. And we don't even judge people by their actions. We assume the worst about their motives. So, I have a question for you tonight. Actually, 3 questions. This is the first one. Am I infected with the habit of cynicism? Now, if you were with us last week, you know that at the end of the message, Steve had you do this with the idea of anger and acknowledge whether anger was an issue for you, right? He actually had you all bow your heads and close your eyes. I'm going to be a little more bold than that, okay? So this is kind of the pre-test. I'm going to talk about cynicism a little bit more. A little bit later, I'll ask you again whether you think you might struggle with this. But I'm just curious, in this room tonight, show of hands, how many of you would say, yeah, I got some of that thing you're describing there, Greg. I carry some cynicism. Good. I appreciate it. I genuinely appreciate the honesty. You know, the way this works in life is that your thought life, and most of us know this, there's kind of a battle going on in our minds for where our thoughts are going to land. And you might think of that thought life battle as an internal battle. The scriptures actually describe that there are external forces on that battle. That the Spirit of God himself is trying to gauge your thought life and shape your thought life in a certain way. But also, the evil one, the deceiver, Satan, the devil himself, is also, this is where he does his work to deceive you and have you think about the world in a different way. This is truly a spiritual battle. And in John 10:10, it says this. It says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. This thief is trying to rob you of something in this life. And if he can order your mind in a way that robs you of something, that's significant. But Christ has come to give you life and life to the full. And I don't know many subjects more than cynicism where this line is drawn, that it either robs you or if you can overcome it, it gives you life. Let me just describe for a few minutes here what gets robbed in your life if you're a cynical person. Maybe this will help you see whether you're a cynical person or not. It robs you of happiness. If you've noticed a pattern in your life where you say, I want to be happy, and then you chase after something, hoping it will get you to be happy, but then you're not happy, but you still have this longing to say, I want to be happy, and then you chase after something else to try to be happy. Cynicism will rob you of the happiness or joy that exists in life. Worse than that, cynicism will rob you of trust. That's the very nature of cynicism, is that now in a relationship with almost anyone else, I'm not just dealing with you, I'm dealing with the cloud over you, and so it robs trust. And it probably marks most of our relationships, for those of us who really struggle with cynicism, as relationships that are no longer transformational or transcendent, but they're just transactional. I kind of think, well, if you do it for me, then I'll do it for you, and that's stuff. But if you stop doing it for me, there's no trust in the relationship. And one of the most important things for any human being to make our way through this life in a healthy way is to know that we have at least one and maybe a few other human beings in our world that are in our corner. They have our back. No matter what, they're with us. We can trust that. But when you have cynicism, You lose that. And you might even feel like, I'm not sure if anybody's in my corner. I'm not sure anyone has my back. And maybe they don't have your back because of how you express yourself in the world. Cynicism robs us of dreaming. It makes us think about the future in a way that says, well, it's probably not going to happen. I'll be frustrated. It'll be settled. I know. Even if I do what I'm supposed to do, the government's going to do their thing, or the world's going to go this way, or whatever. It just robs you of the joy of dreaming and anticipating what's in the future. And to be a little more technical about that, it robs us of hope. And it makes it start to feel like life is hopeless. That my marriage is never going to get better. That my son is never going to come home. That my boss is never going to get it. That nothing will change. And so we live without hope. In Steve's chapter on cynicism in the book, he said this: cynics never change the world. They tell us why the world can't change. But around here, and in the kingdom of God, it's all about change. It's all about transformation. It's all about being used by God to change lives. If I didn't think that people could change, if I didn't think the world could change, we'd be lost here. And so we have to somehow pay attention to this debilitating, darkening habit that is called cynicism. So, question number 2. What should I pay attention to? Like, what habit or pattern in your life would you notice to say, oh, that's where I've gone wrong. That's why I ended up in this place. And that's what I need to adjust as I go. And I want to give you 2 passages actually where Jesus was on the receiving end of cynicism. I think these are fantastic models for how cynicism really works in real life. You might be familiar with this passage. It's in John chapter 1. Nathanael was being introduced to Jesus for the very first time. I mean, it's just John chapter 1. This is very early in the Jesus story. And Nathanael says, Nazareth? Can anything good come from there? So, Jesus is Jesus of Nazareth. His earthly father and his mother Mary were from Nazareth. It's a small kind of podunk town. It had received a reputation as a small podunk town. Nobody expected anything significant to come out of Nazareth. And this is so interesting to me because, forgive my comparison of myself to Jesus for a moment, but I too came from a small podunk town. And it was interesting to me. When I first moved up here, people would say, oh, where are you from? I'd say, Camp Point, Illinois. I was proud of it. And they're like, where's that? And actually, after I took some people from Suncrest down there within my first year here, I overheard someone describing where it was. They said, yeah, we went to Greg's hometown. You go down I-55, you go about 2 hours, you turn right, you go to the middle of nowhere, and then you turn right again, and it's a little bit down the road. And I noticed that when I would tell people I was from this rural community in Illinois, it was almost like people anticipated well, all the people there are probably Neanderthals where their knuckles drag on the ground. I'm like, it was almost like Camp Point. Can anything good come from Camp Point? And here's the thing. Those people may not have ever met anyone from Camp Point, but they had a reputation or they met someone from an area like Camp Point, and then, here's the thing, and then they applied it to everyone from that area, including me. But this isn't just about small town, right? This is actually how we start to experience life. You come across someone who has different political views than you have. It doesn't matter, Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, it doesn't matter to me. But it could go something like this. A Democrat? Could anyone be a smart Democrat? A conservative? Can any good come from a conservative? Or, I could go on a little rant here. I'll go on that rant later, okay? Let me show you another passage where this comes up, which is just fascinating to me as people are judging Jesus. This is Mark chapter 6. They said, isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James? I mean, we know what carpenters are like, right? Do you know those things about Mary's family? You've seen his brother James, right? We're not saying this. No one encountered Jesus. They're just taking something they encountered and applying it to Jesus with a cynical attitude. It says, and they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his own relatives. And a lot of us have felt that, right? A lot of us don't necessarily like to go home. Go to your parents, go to your grandparents, because they still see you the way you were when you were 15 or 5. And I think it's a healthy step for all of us to remind ourselves of right here is to say, what are we doing to our kids? And maybe our grandkids. You know, it's true that sometimes the problem with parents is that they believe in their kids too much. I have come across those parents. They think their kids are way better than their kids actually are. That's possible. But more often, I see parents who actually can't imagine that their kids could become something more, could do something great, could be a world changer. Because when they were 15 or when they were 5, they did this or had that habit or got arrested or did whatever it was. They just can't get that block out of their mind. One thing happened. Some small things happened. A season of life happened. And now they've been labeled with the cynicism of a parent or an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent. So, if I was to explain this technically, and I want to for a moment, this is how I would explain it. Technically, the way cynicism works is that you have a negative experience that then gets applied to a broad range of people or a broad range of situations. Something really happened, right? This doesn't come out of nowhere. There was some negative thing that happened. But you take that negative thing and now you apply it broadly, well beyond the person or the situation where it happened. You know, talked about different political views. I think anytime you hear yourself using the phrase, those people, you know you've gotten this wrong. You know, one of my dreams at this stage is that I might reconcile the gaps between generations in this world. Because you had a bad experience with one of those millennials or a kid who was Gen Z. And then somehow it became those people, that generation. I've applied it all to them. And some of you who are younger, okay, boomer, right? Right? And you had a bad experience. I mean, you can't even believe how your uncle would talk, and he's of that generation. So, but then you just applied it. You just applied it. You became cynical. And this is a massive challenge for our world today. If we're going to take a single instance of something that happened to us and then apply it broadly, try to do that. Well, don't try to do it based on ethnicity or race, based on union or management, based on any of the things that divide us all the time. Because what you will get is the world we have right now. A world that anticipates people being horrible, and that anticipation means someone's at best digging out of a hole, and at worst, actually never really has a chance with me. But it's not just groups of people. It's the situations that we've experienced before that we now apply to new situations. There is no doubt people in this room who are on your second marriage and your spouse, your wife or your husband, your second wife, your second husband is paying a price because of what your first wife or your first husband did to you. That's cynicism. That is a defense mechanism because I was hurt and it was painful, but it lodged itself inside of me. And it's not because you're a horrible person. These are actually protection methods that we employ, but when we overprotect, then we actually cause the other person to pay the price. I was debating whether I was going to admit this to you, but I'll do it. Why not? So, one of the things about staying at a church for 26 years is, and staying at a church for 26 years and being a person who values faithfulness, tries to live it out to other people, to my family and other settings, and wants it from some, is that when you stay one place 26 years, you start to get a little thing going on inside that says, I've never left anybody, but people seem to leave me. Church people who it seemed like they were faithful, like I was there for them in their time of need, and then they walked away. And COVID season, oh my goodness, COVID season, it just threw this like crazy. And I would notice inside myself, starting to be cynical. You didn't even know this. Cynical about you. And you didn't leave me. That doesn't mean you didn't pay a price. I actually, this is my confession, I actually led a staff meeting once that said, hey, let's be careful of church people. And I'm like, well, what do we have? We all are church people. But this is what happens. You feel some pain. You feel some hurt. And instead of applying that back directly to the person who hurt you, you apply it broadly. It seeps out to others. This happens with God. Some people are very cynical toward God. Last week we were singing a song we sing here often enough, and it's one of those where we say, I've seen cancer disappear. I've seen mental health restored. I've seen, don't you tell me he can't do it. We're talking about the work of God in our lives. And every time we sing that, I have this wrestling match inside of me because I have seen everything we sing about. I've seen it happen. And I know there are people sitting here who say, well, you didn't answer my prayer. My cancer didn't disappear. My dad's cancer didn't disappear. And we take this situation, even with God, and say, since one thing, I prayed once and it didn't go the way I wanted to. Now I hold this against you. And it will mess us up. So that's the technical explanation. Let me give you the relational explanation. This is actually how it works in real life. People just say, they can't win with you. If you've ever had someone tell you, you know what, I feel like I can't win with you, you should believe them. If your employee tells you that, if your son tells you that, if your spouse tells you that, they say, you know what, I feel like I can't win with you. You should just believe them. So, how would we overcome this ugly, ugly thing? What practices could reduce and replace cynicism? Because that's how habits work, right? We don't want to be conformed to the pattern of this world, the cynical pattern of this broken, infected, messed up world. We want to be transformed by the renewing of our minds in a way that could reduce, maybe eliminate, replace the cynicism that's there with something else. I'm going to give you 3 things that if you feel like you're a cynical person, I want to ask you to take seriously to replace this habit in your life. First is confession. Confession. In some sense, this is the first step in all of these habits. It is owning it. And actually, I want to pause right now, since I've had a chance to describe things a little bit more, and ask the same question that I asked earlier and see if the same people raise their hands, or maybe different people raise their hands. But everyone, if you feel like in any part of your life you deal with cynicism, would you raise your hand? This is owning it. Actually, keep your hand up for a second. It's possible that the person who bears the brunt of your cynicism more than anyone else is sitting next to you right now. You can put your hands down. And if they're sitting next to you right now, they just need some signal You can grab their hand, you can touch their leg. You can hit them really hard with your elbow if you want. But what I want you to communicate to them is this. If you're a cynical person, is this. I hear you. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to you that I carry cynicism and you deal with things that seep out from something that happened long ago, maybe something that happened with someone else before. But whoever it is that's on the receiving end of your cynicism, confession is the right step. James writes it like this. He says, therefore, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other. That's the way you'll be healed. And so maybe it's the person sitting next to you, or maybe it's not. If it's not, I want to ask you to go and have this conversation. Say, hey, I've been cynical toward you, and it is not fair to you. I'm sorry, and I'm on a journey to get better. Second thing we'll need to do is pay attention to gratitude. Actually the most common pattern of cynicism that's highlighted in the scriptures is watching people who have been forgiven by God in what Christ has done for us, then withhold forgiveness from someone else. And this is one of the conversations in the scriptures. How could any follower of Jesus keep withholding forgiveness, keep holding grudges toward other people when God himself did not hold a grudge toward us and gave us forgiveness when we did nothing to earn it? And the crucible in that is the idea of gratitude. It's that if I'm actually overwhelmed by God's forgiveness for me, how beautiful and grace-filled and undeserved that was. That gratitude for what God has done is what will mean, of course I'll forgive other people around me. I'm overwhelmed with gratitude. Gratitude, of course, helps us see the world in a way that's essentially the opposite of cynicism. Instead of anticipating the worst, I start to see the best. And maybe if I see something good in one person, I could let that seep out and apply it in a broader way that actually gives everyone in my life a chance, a real chance in life with me. One of the habits that I kickstarted again this past November was handwriting notes. I used to do it all the time. I just noticed something I was grateful for, someone I was grateful for, and I'd write them a note. I used to write 3 or 4 notes a week. People in our church, almost everyone in our church had probably received one back 5 years ago, and I kind of lost the habit. Back in November, I thought, no. If I'm going to carry myself with the right posture toward our church family, it starts with gratitude. I don't know if that's a helpful practice for you, if you're a note writer or not. Maybe you're a texter, but it is noticing what's good instead of noticing what's bad. It is the battle for the attitude in our mind. It's not letting the thief steal, kill, and destroy, but instead it's allowing Jesus to give us life and life to the full. And it changes things. But I think the real factor, if you're going to move from being cynical to stepping out of that, reducing and eliminating it, is actually a practice called meditation. Now, when you hear the word meditation, you might think weird, bizarre. Sit with your legs crossed, fold your arms. I don't know. I kind of hate actually the way the word meditation has been co-opted to mean something average people wouldn't do. But the idea behind meditation is actually very simple. It's that I pause each day and I discipline my mind to think about certain things. This could be pausing 10 minutes a day in the morning or 10 minutes a day before you go to bed and just disciplining your mind, praying, reflecting, thinking, but aiming your thoughts at things that see the world as God sees it, not as the evil one sees it. And the best passage I know that helps me with meditation is Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. Maybe you've heard this before. It says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about those things. And maybe the practice for your life this week, this month, is just to sit with Philippians 4:8, 10 minutes a day. And say, man, I know I'm prone to see the negative. I know I'm prone to see the bad. I know I'm prone to take one thing and let it explode into other things. But God, let me pause right now and meditate and think about these things. And maybe you use it as a list. Say, hey, what's something that's true? Something that's good and true about my spouse, about my son, about my boss? What is something that is noble? Where I'm not going to question someone's motives. I'm not going to act as though there's probably some agenda somewhere else. I'm just going to see nobility for where it is. Where do I see someone doing something right? And how can I go affirm that and say, you know what? If that person can do what's right, I can do what's right. I can set my mind on those things. Whatever is pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, praiseworthy. I want to turn our church into a church of meditators beginning today. So, that's cynicism. You own it, you confess it, you appreciate gratitude, and you meditate. And just like anger last week, if this is you, and you actually can change the orientation of your life this year with the power of God and the wisdom of the Scriptures, it will change your family, it will change your home, it will change your future. And that's what I want.
Darkness run for cover, but the miracle that I just can't get over, my name is registered in heaven. I believe in signs and wonders. I have resurrection power. Still the miracle that I just can't get over, my name is registered in heaven. Oh, my praise belongs to you forever. This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous. I'll testify. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. Sons and daughters, bought with blood and washed in water. Sing the praises of the Spirit, Son and Father. Our God will finish what He started. Oh, our God will finish what He started. This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous. I'll testify. This is my testimony. testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous. I'm justified. This is my testimony. Oh, I'm alive. This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous. I'm justified. This is my testimony. This is my testimony.
I hope that this has been a meaningful experience for you, even online. And I want you to know that every time that we get together, both online and in person, we include a time of communion. This is a moment for people who follow Jesus to look back on life and remember with gratitude all the amazing things that God has done, our need for God right now, and to look forward with hope, knowing that God is with us every step of the way. So now is the time to get some food and drink to represent Jesus' body and his blood that was broken and poured out for each and every one of us. And during that time, we're gonna reflect together. If you don't follow Jesus, that's totally okay. I'm glad that you're checking out this video. Go ahead and use this time to reflect on what you've heard so far. And with that, let's focus on the love of Jesus together. Before you turn off this video, go ahead and hit the like, subscribe, and share button. And I want you to know that this video, this isn't the church. You are. So this week, I hope that you go and make a difference, that you go and be the church.